Oh, Andy Liu, my brother.
Mm.
It is August. You know what that means?
Oh, what does it mean?
It means we are searching for NBA content while we are privately geeking out on NFL content 24/7. Um, it's dry in Warriors. Although I will say this, the Warriors are giving us little things.
Yes, they are.
I'm expecting at some point Steph goes on vacation, but it does not seem like he will anytime soon. But yeah, meanwhile, I look at my timeline and it's just a civil war over the Niners 24/7. Meanwhile, I look at my Raider friends and they're just like, yeah, I guess we got Jimmy. That sucks. So not too much else going on. We got our friend from Niner Nation, special guest Akash joining us tonight. I feel like we got to have a Niners segment at least until we get to like Warriors training camp every week. And hey, if the season goes well, we might as well have a Niners segment, all season, right?
And the Niners are, and we'll get to it, one of the most interesting teams year in, year out because they're so good, and yet there's so much to criticize. That's what makes them perfect for social media, for podcasts, for radio, right? Like it makes our lives, it makes anyone's job easier. Everybody that covers the Niners, they don't even have to try to get topics. Like they just go out there and they just talk QB all day long. It's amazing.
Well, they're in a different position than the Warriors, right? Because they're at like, we know you're good. We know you're on the precipice. So like, are you gonna do it? Or are we gonna, are we gonna have another conversation about how you're the Houston Rockets? Like, and I don't think they're the James Harden Houston Rockets. But if it's another year of championship game and some weird things happening and quarterback flaws showing and that sort of thing, like it's hard to fight those allegations over time.
I think they are. They've got so many good players. I mean, just it's a different sport. They've got so many great guys, but yeah, man, we'll get to it. But at some point, you got to win a Super Bowl. Like, if the Niners just get to the Super Bowl and lose again next season, or is that an accomplishment? I don't know. I've seen so many Niners Super Bowl / NFC Championship losses. I don't think they can hurt me anymore, Sam. But I'm sure they'll find a way this season. I'm sure they will.
We'll save this for later, but it did kind of surprise me when I realized five championship games in less than 10 years. Like, it's kind of consistent. But anyway, different topic. A player who has won a championship.
Well done.
You like that? Andre Iguodala. Not sure if he's coming back. We got an article today from Monty Poole. Mentions, and really it's Mike Dunleavy saying, my sense is Andre's got other stuff going on, but he has my number. The phone is always on. Iguodala, he's a troll. He's like, I'm currently unemployed. We'll see. He's not willing to say he's retired or anything. Dunleavy did mention we're communicating some this summer. We'll see. We're not going to close the door on anything. But my guess and my belief is he won't be back. Now, if you listen to it, I think it sounded like a stronger, I'm not going to retire him for him, but like they're not anticipating him back. But, last year wasn't sure Andre was coming back and he came back. And they do have at least one open roster spot for a veteran. So where's your head at?
Yeah, I don't get it. I don't understand the delay. I thought he retired right when the season ended. When he was on the court, Sam, he was good. He was fine on the court.
All 32 minutes or something.
And that was the problem. It felt like anytime he got on the court, he just smashed his hand or tweaked his back or just old people shit, right? He just couldn't stay on the court. And I just thought, okay, like it's time. They're telling you, whoever's the basketball guards are telling you to go away. It's time to go away. Here's what I think, though. I wonder if Steph is kind of telling him like, hey, this is the last shot, because they've traded for Chris Paul. He's a vet. Like last season was still kind of transition year. Like this is it, right? Like this is the one. Chris Paul's not going to be here longer than this year. This is it. Let's go all in. And Steph's like, give me everything you have for one more season. That's maybe what's happening. Is my closest guess, because I thought he was done.
Yeah, I need someone to Photoshop Iguodala into that Vince Carter meme. I got one more in me. That's what I need right now.
Late stage Vince Carter, very good player. Warriors could have used him.
I mean, Andre's like, it's a joke, but when he did play, he could give you a good 10 to 15 minutes, which is like all you're really asking for from that 14th roster guy. Like, if I throw you out there, can you play competent basketball with energy, right? Like, this shouldn't, if you're hanging on your 14th man, you have bigger roster issues. You're just hoping to get someone who's like good locker room guy, good culture, and you throw him out there, he's smart. Like Juan Toscano-Anderson played that role, and Juan was great at it, right? Obviously,
but he's available. You know what I mean? Like JT was at least available versus Andre.
True,
right?
true. That's the issue with Andre. Every time he got on the court, game 2, he broke something, which is the telltale sign of like, you're very close to 40, buddy. It might be time. Like, save the knees. Get to the golf course. I don't know. I don't think he's playing. Yeah, you've seen him. He's talking about some ventures and some golf stuff he's got going on. I think he's retiring, but I do think it's funny that like we're discussing Rudy Gay. I'm not really sure Rudy's a better player. Like, it's the same thing, right? Like, if anything, Andre's probably better if he can stay healthy, just because he knows the system and he provides some of the intangibles a little more so. I just don't know that he can. And Rudy Gay at least seems like he could be in Jersey 55 games, which is,
I mean, literally point. Rudy Gay last 4 seasons, 67, 63, 55, and 56. I mean, that's what he's going to give you. He's going to give you 55 with 15 minutes. And
a lot of those were he got healthy DMPs, so he was kind of playing that vet bench role where he's like, "I'm available. You let me know if tonight's the night I need to give you 15 minutes."
Yeah, I think that is what. Like, I would probably prefer Andre than Rudy Gay, but Rudy Gay's more available. It feels like the Warriors don't want either. Feels like they're kind of hoping that it's Lester Quinones wins out that 14th spot. Maybe someone younger, more athletic.
Different position though, right?
Right.
Because like those guys.
Weird. By the way. Weird.
Andre will play the Draymond role. Like, he'll play a 4-5. Rudy plays that same role. Like, Lester's.
But isn't it weird that they're like, oh, it's an open competition for the 14th spot, and it's like they're like, okay, it's Lester fighting the 4th. I think it's weird. I haven't thought about it too heavily, but my assumption is they just want to keep Lester Quinones motivated, because I think they want him to earn a roster spot by next season, but they want to keep him on a 2-way. Like, they just want to keep him motivated to stay with the squad. Yeah. You brought up Chris Paul might not be on the team next year. Yeah. Well, maybe Lester Quinones takes his spot, right? Like, he's not a point guard, but he's flirting with being an NBA rotation player, and they've invested a lot into his development. I'm sure they would like him to get there in the next 6 months, right? Otherwise, what's the point of all this development and all that work, right? Yeah, I agree.
So I kind of think they want to see if someone like Gallinari gets bought out.
That's an actual impact. Like, rotation guy.
I mean, we're assuming it's the same guy who was pre-injury, but yeah.
Even if he's like 80%, he's better than Andre and Rudy Gay. Best they could get.
Sure. And I think part of it is like, let's see if we can get Rudy Gay to just take a camp contract just so we can see our options type of deal. It's August. If you haven't signed a deal with a team now, you're probably going to wait till September to get a contract. So it's just kind of, they're doing what they're doing. And the way I read Dunleavy's statements, it's like Andre is a franchise legend. Whether he gets his jersey retired or whatever they do with him, like he's very important to the franchise history. So it's just kind of like, let him announce he's leaving on his own terms. Don't be the guy who's like, hey, we don't want it back,
They'll retire.
Read the room.
They'll retire his jersey. But yeah, maybe he's just finding, now that I think about it, what you said, he's probably just finding the right time to say he's retiring. He's probably finding the right, like, maybe it's the first home game or something like that. He'll kind of be out there and maybe kind of just like
he'll raise his hand and then be like, oh, my shoulder hurts.
And they'll just call it, right? I think, that's one of my favorite Warriors outside of the top three. Actually, that is my favorite Warrior outside of the core three guys. So, yeah, I think he's done. He's got to be done. So he's probably just finding a way to go out the way that he wants to versus kind of like a random August retirement, right? That's kind of
forever Warrior, Andre Iguodala.
Absolutely. Yeah. The statue, get him the fifth one if KD gets one. So,
Remember Joe Lacob putting out the statement that KD will get a statue the minute he leaves? I'm like, oh, so man. Good.
So they retired his number right away. Right away. Like, all right, Joey, we get it. KD's been on 4 teams since.
Steph, let's talk Steph, and then we'll get Akash on here. Steph talked to our guy Marcus Thompson today. Gave a quote, and this one stood out to me. Guys are going to ask themselves to do things that maybe not all the way vibe with how they see themselves. The biggest thing, look at teams that have won. You realize that there is a certain way about how you go about to show up on a nightly basis. Everybody is important. Everyone is valuable. It's not going to look pretty the majority of the year for some guys. Some are going to be in and out of the rotation. Guys are going to have to be asked to do things they may not all the way vibe with how they see themselves. Steph, I'm just appreciating look at this picture. Look at that. Does that look like a guy who's fucking around?
Last week we talked about him going on the world tour, promoting his movie. At the same time, he's going on a world tour talking about y'all better try to win my way, or you can get the hell off my team. Is basically what he's
doing. To box out, bitch. Yeah, basically is what he's saying.
Who do you think he's talking to?
Dude, at first I thought this was about Poole and Kuminga, but I can make a case it's about Chris Paul. I can make a case it's about Draymond and Clay. I kind of think it's more about Chris Paul and Kuminga more than anyone, but it could apply to basically everyone except for Looney, if we're being honest.
Wiggins, I think is probably a safe bet. It's not. I think it's about Chris Paul. Kuminga's there, but I think their objective this season is maybe not play as much hardball with Kuminga. I think they treated him a little bit unfairly last season, gave him too short of a leash. But if you go back to the quote there, and throw that back up, I think he says something that to me, once I read it, I was like, oh, this is him really kind of outwardly, publicly saying, Chris Paul, you got to get in line for us to win. He goes, it's not going to look pretty for the majority of the year for some guys. Some are going to be in and out of the rotation. Guys are going to be, and then blah, which I mean, he has to do things that may not all the way with vibe with how they see themselves. I think some are going to be in and out of the rotation. It is kind of his view of saying, like, sometimes Chris Paul is going to come off the bench. Sometimes he's not. Sometimes he's going to close. Sometimes he's not. I do think this is a lot about that because the season does hinge on, is Chris Paul bought in or not? Because if he is, they've got a real shot at being a very, very good team, a title team. But if he's not bought in, Sam, I don't think they have a shot of winning a championship if he's not bought in.
I agree with you. I also think it's about Kuminga because we know this is an issue with Kuminga. And I think no matter what they say, they have all made a decision that they think Kuminga is the young guy with the most talent. I would agree with them. They also think his talent specifically is the type of talent they need, which is if Kuminga develops properly, he's like another Wiggins. He's another 6'7", 6'8", maybe 7'2", apparently, wing who can guard multiple positions and also be a threat attacking the rim. Both of those things are things they're sorely lacking, and they could use as many of those guys as possible, right? And they traded Wiseman, but Wiseman was always like a 7-1 guy who's kind of a drop center who wants the ball in his like where that's not fitting what they want to do. And Moody already fits. They know how he fits, but he's not the physical force that Kuminga can be. So to me, it sounds like, I know you see yourself as the next Kawhi Leonard. That's not happening, dude. You're going to be a glue goon wing guy, and we're going to win. And you know what? Your time will come where you get to play with the ball and be more of a playmaker if you buy into that. But you're going to do this now, or you're not going to be on this team. That's the way I read the way they're feeling. And I think the most important thing to take from this is it's no more Mr. like nice guy with Steph. It's kind of, I'm setting the standard in July. Well, I guess we're in August, but he's been doing it since July. I'm setting the standard. You either get on this or you're out of here. I'm not doing he'll come around over the course of the season, because we tried that last year and it didn't work.
Yeah. Glue goon wing guy is a great way to describe what the Warriors always need, which is what Andrew Wiggins became when they won their last championship.
Exactly.
The two biggest S factors this season, two biggest question marks, they're not Draymond Green, even though he just sounds just ridiculous all the time. It's not him. We know what Draymond's going to be in the regular season. He's not suddenly becoming a 38-point three-point shooter, but he's also not going to suddenly become a bad defensive player. He will carry this defense to a top 10 defense. He
also like say what you want. I saw people comment that this was about Clay or Draymond. Those dudes are always the same guys. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, Clay is a shooter. If he's open, he shoots it. Guess what you want? You want him shooting the ball. Draymond never dogs it on defense. Like, they are who they should be. It's about other guys filling their roles.
They're just not as good anymore. So they need other guys to be better. They need Andrew Wiggins to actually play next season. Maybe don't take half the season off for whatever reason. Maybe Jordan Poole, who now is Chris Paul, don't lead the league in turnovers and kind of just do weird things all season. So can Chris Paul, can you do that? Can you buy in the role, right? And then with Kuminga and Moody, who were, zeros last season. Moody was a zero. Kuminga was like a slightly average role player. Like he played 20 minutes. He was solid. But like, can you get to become an above average role player, which is what we think Kuminga can be?
And can it be all season? Not like, we got to bench you for a month to get you to buy in, which was like their issue. Like, Kuminga had a half of a very good season.
Yep.
Needs to have a full season now.
I think that's what Steph is probably most concerned about. But also, it's not like he's saying this passive aggressively. He seems like he's just kind of stating a fact, like, hey, this is what we need, versus kind of I'm going to make an IG post about it.
No,
kind of exactly. Like LeBron fit in or fit out. I don't feel like that's what he's doing. He's just saying, like, hey, this is what we need. This is it right here. That's it.
And we're not getting into it, but Steve Kerr's doing the same thing. It's very direct. I don't think it's malicious. I don't think it's mean. They're just saying, let's set the standard for next year. This is what we want. This is what we're expecting from you. Accept it and buy in. And if you don't want to, I guess we're going to have to look at making a move a different way. I appreciate it just because, look, man, they're older. We saw last season, you might as well just shoot the shot straight and then live with the results, right?
Yep.
All right. I think it's time to bring up our special guest.
Ooh.
I think it's time. Right. From Niner Nation, my guy, Kosh. Kosh, how you doing, man?
Doing fantastic. What's up, man? I was listening to you guys talk about the Warriors role players there, and I was like, what's one issue that the Niners don't have? They've got a bunch of dudes. They just don't have solid quarterback play when it matters. But they got a bunch of dudes, though.
You don't got it. You just start off like that. Just fire coming in. I agree with you. By the way, is that the tower next to you?
We're across from the Elon's palace over there. Luckily, there was no X strobing into my bedroom, but I could see it like literally go up, and then they took it down like 2 days later.
Unbelievable.
But, yeah, man.
He doesn't know how San Francisco works. Thanks for joining us, brother.
Appreciate you for having me.
I was gonna say, I feel like that the problems we're talking about with the Warriors, which are more chemistry and communication and just buying into your role, in general, I don't think those exist on the Niners in any capacity, and like on football teams, I guess they exist when you don't have an identity in general, but like it's not really an NFL based problem.
No, I don't think so. And it was funny. I saw like over the weekend, Travis Kelce like punched a teammate, and I saw Draymond's name like tagged in it like on the video post, and I was like, it's so different because in training camps you end up with a lot of fights or melees,
Right.
whatever the case is, and it's just not a big deal. But something like that on a basketball team just ends up being blown way out of proportion, right? So yeah, very different.
That's what Draymond would say. It's like sometimes you just punch a guy. It's not that big a deal, dude.
We just move on.
I mean, the Niners had, who was it? Juwan Jennings the other day. I feel like last year it was Fred Warner a few times with Ayuk, right? So, but this year, I mean, last year I felt kind of like, hey, those are good players. Juwan Jennings is kind of, whatever. It's like, you got to a fight, who cares? Type of thing.
No, it was like Brandon Ayuk and Fred Warner last year. And even when they were getting into it, you'd be like, all right, they're just building their identity, right? You never look at it like those two guys are going to ruin the team chemistry. Whereas I guess maybe it's just, there's 52 some odd guys and just the nature of the sport. It's more physical.
It's football,
more
man.
violent,
Yeah.
Right? You just don't think about it the same way. Yeah.
All right. So pads went on this week. This is peak like social media time where everyone's overreacting to everything and none of it really means anything. But where's your head at with the Niners going into this season relative to other seasons?
It's funny, and I don't know if I've told either of you guys this, but it feels like we're watching like election coverage. Like you got Fox News on one side, you got CNN on the other side, and you just get like the most extreme versions of what happens on a day-to-day basis. And like you can see like each side has their like inherent bias with like the quarterbacks, and it's like they're like reporting stats. And I saw this today, and it's like, do other teams actually report like quarterback stats at training camp? Like no one else tracks like completion percentage.
That's amazing.
Except for the Niners. And it's like, guys, we're taking this like way too seriously. Like it's just camp. Like let's see how this thing plays out. And I think my take has been kind of the same all like off season, which is Brock Purdy. Like he played 8 or 9 games in the regular season. He had a couple playoff games. Like he showed it in the games, like with this group of guys, like he's able to lead an offense. Like they were extremely efficient. Like if he's healthy, like he has the benefit of the doubt. Like he should be like the leader in this race, coming into camp. And then Trey Lance, like he's clearly improved his mechanics. He's working with a new quarterback coach. He looks better. His just throwing motion, his footwork is better. He's been a little bit more accurate this camp. And then there's Sam Darnold, who like has the tools, but has failed at other stops in the NFL. And then we'll just kind of see where it falls. But yeah, it just seems like certain groups of people have like
who's Fox News?
Predetermined bias.
Who's Fox News and who's CNN? So which one's Grant? Which one is he? Which one's Lombardi?
I think the beauty is it depends on your personal perspective.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, is this like politically based? Like, I don't want to get in trouble, like trying to like name guys to certain things, but I mean, you know what I mean, right? Like, it feels like those two guys are like just on opposite.
Who's One American
like,
News Network?
Yeah, and it's like the majority of fans are like, our team is stacked. Like they signed Javon Hargrave, who was probably the best free agent in this class. They're getting some of these young
Nobody
guys
talks about it, by the way.
Yeah.
Nobody talks about Javon Hargrave. Not a soul. Nobody cares.
Yeah. And it's like this team is like has like a couple weaknesses, right? Like you could talk about right tackle, you could talk maybe like safety, has some question marks. But outside of that, it's like this team has stars everywhere, and yet they consistently talk about like the same
No. I'm going to talk about the same thing. I'm going to ask you about QB. This is what I truly. I'm going to talk about Sam. I'm sure wants to talk about Colton McKivitz, but I'm going to talk about Trey and Sam. So it feels like to me, correct me if I'm wrong, it feels like to me that they're going to do their best to trade Trey Lance here in the next month or so. They're completely fine with Sam Darnold being the number 2. He's probably good enough to be a backup quarterback. Brock is the number 1. I agree with that. He looked great. You got to give him a shot to start. You can't just bench him after what he did last season. So they're comfortable with that. Brandon Allen, if they can carry him on the roster, feels like they're okay with that. It's a number 3. So they've got their 3 guys. if they think they can get Trey Lance for like a
It's like
third round
Kerr's
pick.
Anthony Lamb fetish type of thing.
Or are you talking about Brandon Allen or Sam Darnold?
Yeah, Brandon Allen.
Brandon
Where it's just
Allen,
like
yeah.
it's just like I don't know why you give this much attention to this guy. But that's a different conversation.
Exactly. I mean, he seems fine. He's a third guy. So it feels like to me, Akash, that they're doing their best to say Trey Lance looks great. He's really progressed, but secretly like, hey, let's flip him for a third or a fourth, and let's just keep this moving. Because if we have to hear about Trey Lance and Sam Darnold all season, that's just where the Warriors. That's just not where the Niners want to be. They're trying to win a championship. They're just they're not trying to talk about a backup QB all season long, right? Am I wrong there?
No, I think that's exactly it. And I feel like a lot of people miss that when they're like, how is Trey Lance not going to be on this roster? He's clearly better than Sam Darnold. He's clearly better than Brandon Allen. People were freaking out. And it's like, guys, there's like a bigger portion than the player, right? We're talking about a backup quarterback battle. And part of the backup quarterback's job is just kind of to be invisible, right? To be low key, like low attention, like kind of be the quarterback's best friend and not draw attention to yourself. And if you had Trey Lance, as your backup quarterback, for example, behind Brock Purdy, I feel like that would just continually, cause a stir during the season. Like say Brock Purdy has a bad game. Say he throws a couple picks. Say he misses a couple throws. Yep. All of a sudden you're going to deal with like, well, Trey Lance would have hit that throw. Well, Trey Lance would have thrown that ball away. He would have been better. Like, let's play him. And it's like, I don't think the Niners want to deal with that all season long. Like they've got a roster that's ready to win a championship. I don't think this window is going to extend much past maybe like next season. They've got like a 2-year window and they're trying to capitalize on it. And they're not in the business of like seeing what they have in a quarterback. They just want to roll out their week one. They're trying to be the number 1 seed and host the NFC Championship game versus, playing on the road. And they're trying to have a quicker start. And they don't want to deal with any of the hoopla of like, is it Lance? Is it Darnold? Is it Purdy? None of that stuff. I think they believe in Purdy.
Yeah.
He's shown that he's been healthy, right? It's not like he's had setbacks or he's had elbow issues. And they would much rather, I think, internally roll with Darnold and like if Darnold and Lance gave you the same output, just because he doesn't come with maybe the baggage that Lance does.
Right. Do you so that ties to something else. You're saying, maybe a 2-year window, which like I get it's the NFL. If it's not age, it's contracts, like it's teams don't stay together long enough. Do you get the sense, because the one thing I took from like clips I saw was like they seem very focused and aware of how small their window is. Like George Kittle, Debo, a few of these guys, just their general demeanor comes across as like, this might be our last shot at the whole thing.
Yeah, like you guys were talking about Steph and how he knows, like, hey man, we're getting older. Like we can't put up with the BS from last season. Like it's championship or bust right now. And I kind of get that sense from the Niners too. And it's a little different in the NFL, right? It's more based off of like salary cap, age, things like that. And across the board, like Deebo Samuel, like this is probably the first offseason where I feel like, man, he's like been training the entire thing. He's coming into camp in shape. Like he's taking this thing seriously. Brandon Ayuk, I feel like he's going to be talked about like a top 10 receiver. Whew. You look at defensively, outside of Nick Bosa, who's out, he's held out because of contract reasons. Everyone else is just, it feels like the whole team is dialed in, right? Coaching staff down. I think they know what's at stake, right? They know that their windows right now. They've got a team full of guys that are in their like physical prime, kind of maybe towards the tail end of it. They know that like contractually, it's going to be hard to keep like Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel and some of these other guys on the roster next year. And I think, they feel confident that like, okay, they've seen Brock Purdy now. If he can stay healthy, they feel pretty good about their chances. And the other thing is the NFC is really weak, right? Like all the good quarterbacks. You look at all the good quarterbacks.
It really is just kind of Philly and
right. It's just Philly, San Francisco, maybe Dallas. You kind of throw into that mix, maybe Seattle if they can kind of come together. And you look around and you're like, man, we should have a pretty good shot if we're healthy, going into January, and we can come out of this conference and then all of a sudden it's just one game. So I think that's how they look at it.
Makes sense. Outside of the quarterback position, what is your biggest roster question with this Niners team? Like, what do you think? Like, quarterback's going to dominate first, second, third, fourth discussion. But outside of that, it's a pretty complete roster.
It is. It's as complete as you can get given, just salary cap constraints, all that type of stuff. I think the offensive line probably is the biggest question mark, and especially that right side. I mean, you got Trent Williams, Aaron Banks really came into his own last season. I expect him to take a leap. Jake Brendel's back. He had a good season. You know, he's not great, but he's not bad either. He like fills a void at his price tag. Spencer Burford, year 2. I think the big question mark with him is he rotated with what's his face, Dan Brunskill last season. Dan Brunskill's no longer here, so now he's going to be asked to play full time. So it's like, can he maintain his level of play? And then Colton McKivitz. You know, I know Mike McGlinchey got shit on social media for, you know, just his terrible plays, but he was, you know, he played all 17 games. He was largely consistent for the most part outside of some of those bad plays. And it's like, can Colton McKivitz just maintain that level of play at tackle? Just because edge rushers, especially now in the NFL, like every team has 2 good edge rushers. And so you really got to have solid tackle play. And the Niners didn't necessarily address that this offseason just because of their cap issues. They didn't have any high draft picks. And so they just chose to roll it back with McKivitz. And we'll see how that turns out.
So I don't understand. So help me understand their philosophy, because they spent a ton of money on Javon Hargrave, who's the best D lineman, top 10 D lineman probably in the NFL.
Easy.
So
yeah.
they're stacked. They've got Bosa, Hargrave, and they've got Armstead. They've got Drake Jackson, who looks like he might be good. How come they don't allocate that money to the offensive line? You look at the Chiefs, they've rebuilt their offensive line. You look at the Bengals, they're like, oh, Joe Burrow tore his ACL. Let's figure it out. Philly's consistently got the best offensive line in the NFL. How come the Niners don't just say, let's just throw Hargrave's money at offensive line? Because I'm not saying the D-line doesn't need Hargrave, but they can get away with not having Hargrave. I don't know how you can get away with Colton McKivitz, man. Like, he's probably not good. They might be screwed. And then you've got Jake Bendel, and then you talked about these other guys, like, cool, man, but they're probably not good outside of Trent Williams, who's also hurt like 5 games a season. So it's like, what are we doing here with the O-line?
Yeah, I think part of it's just their like organizational philosophy. They believe in like stacking the defensive line. Whereas like Philly, you mentioned, their philosophy is like both sides. Like, we need to have good offensive linemen and good defensive linemen. And I think maybe it's like Kyle Shanahan being like an offensive play caller. He's thinking like, okay, we can get away with like an above average offensive line. Like, I can play call my way out of this. Whereas like defensively, I have no control over this defensive line. It's like all about the dudes, less about the scheme. And so they invest on that side of the ball. And I think the other part of it is like McGlinchey, what he makes on average per year is very similar in cost to what Javon Hargrave makes, except you get a way more premium talent at that price tag. And so from a value standpoint, you're just like, I'd rather have this guy.
Well, I was going to say there's also just more D linemen who hit free agency who are impact. Like, I just can't think of a good O lineman or like a premium one who hits free agency. So
I mean, McGlinchey was like top of the market. Like, he got paid insane money. He got paid a lot. And if you ask the majority of Niner fans, like, you would speak to this, Andy, like, you'd be like, my God, like, he's making that much for the type of.
I'm ready to move on. Give me a better, exactly.
And then there's nothing out there. It's hard to watch this O line. It's all. I'm sure Shanahan's thing is like, his thing is probably I can paper some of those concerns, because I'm a genius. You know, which
that's right.
I mean, he does have a great scheme, right? So sometimes it's just, man, like that O-line does get destroyed sometimes, man.
Yeah, there's some plays like, you know, you're watching like 60 offensive plays a game across 17 weeks. There's plays where it's rough for Mike McGlinchey or some of those guys on the interior too, right? Outside of Trent. And I think their thing is like, okay, if McKivitz is as good as McGlinchey, but we're only paying you a couple $1 million, we can live with that, because a couple seasons ago, we went to the NFC Championship game with like not even McGlinchey's backup at right tackle.
Yeah,
so we can live with that at a lower cost and just spend that money elsewhere, right? It's like this pie that you're trying to like divide. So
I'm kind of thinking to myself, it's like you can't get the ball to your 4 studs on offense, Debo, Kittle, CMC, and Ayuk if you can't stay in front. But it's like, I don't know. You can always just hand it off to those guys. I mean, it's not that hard to throw a 5-yard slant, unless you're Trey Lance. Apparently, it's not that hard.
Let's end it on
screen
this.
Pass to Debo hits different.
They really say he can't throw a short pass. It's like, man, you remember when Cap couldn't throw a short pass? Like, he would just laser a 5-yard pass, but Cap would throw a great deep ball, just terrible in the short one.
He would.
Man.
He would.
Let's end on this one. What are you most excited about
this season? I feel like this season's the most complete roster they've had in Shanahan's era. Like, I think this is the team. Like 2019, I think like kind of snuck up on all of us that like followed them, right? Like, they weren't very good in 17. They added Garoppolo. He got hurt in 18. But 19, it kind of just snuck up on you. Maybe internally they felt it, but like this season, you look around and you're like, my God, like they got studs like everywhere on this roster. Like Brock Purdy looks healthy. Like there should be no excuse as long as they're able to stay somewhat healthy for like why they can't make another deep playoff run. So I think that's probably it. And I think like the urgency from the team is very evident. Like they all realize like shit, our window could be closing in like another year. Like we gotta like we've got a special team. Like we've got to make use of this. And it feels like they're just like you mentioned, like more serious, more urgent, like from this point onwards.
The urgency stands out. Yeah.
Right. And so I think that excites me.
Versus
are
they more talented?
Like, screw it around.
Are they more talented than the Harbaugh teams?
I think so. I mean, top to bottom, you look at like their running back room, like Christian McCaffrey, like Elijah Mitchell, like he doesn't stay healthy, but like when he's healthy, he's a good running back. Receiver wise, I mean, Brandon Ayuk, probably going to be a top 10 guy. Deebo Samuel, I mean, the season he had a couple years ago is unreal. George Kittle, top 2 tight end.
Do not talk me into drafting everyone on my fantasy team though. I don't trust Shanahan at all.
That part's hard.
So
because they divide all that stuff up. And then defensively, you look across the board, you're like, they were like a top 2 defense, and they basically got everybody back. They added a safety in the second round. New defensive coordinator, but I think they'd be able to like keep up that level of play again on that side of the ball. So it's like hard not to be excited with the level of talent they have. You're like, they just have to put it together in January and February.
I'm not convinced they have a better defense than the peak Harbaugh defenses, but I could absolutely be convinced they have a better overall team.
Yeah,
so
I think so. I mean, they've got better play calling too. They had Cap, who's a lot better than anything the Jimmy G has been and Brock. So I mean, as it always comes down to,
that's a neutralizer, right?
As a Niners fan, you know, it always comes down to the same bullshit. You don't got a quarterback, you're not going to win. That's how life goes.
Yeah.
They've got 4 quarterbacks though, so you know.
They do, and it's hard, right? Like
you might find a 5th one.
You guys go through like 8 months of the regular season to get to like what really means a lot, right? Like April, May, June, and now it's like for the Niners, you're like, God, they got to stack like a good September, October, et cetera, to get back to the playoffs to make a run. It's like all about January and February.
I'm ready,
like it is for Warriors, right?
I'm ready. Yeah. I'm ready. I need the pain. I need it.
Akash, appreciate you. Anything you want to plug before we get out here?
Nothing else, man. I appreciate you guys for having me on. I watch you guys all through the playoffs, and I'm excited to get back to that, honestly. The offseason, especially in basketball, is tough, right? But I'm glad we got football, and I'm excited to get back to Warriors.
Roll. Let's do it. All right. Appreciate everyone. Take off.
Appreciate it.